Thank you, Mary, and thanks for the invitation again. I have to just make a minor correction here. I'm former General Secretary of the Communist Party. I did stand down at the beginning of the year. I'm still full-time, I'm just not getting paid anymore. Um, can I just also say, before looking at my notes, I think Darrell helped me out with a piece of valuable research a couple of years ago. So I'm going to thank him for that, but I'm also perhaps patronisingly going to give him a little advice. I was told a few years ago, never recite a list because you will leave somebody out. Never start a list without finishing it. But Darrell quite rightly referred to the great international effort that was the International Brigades, the medical brigades as well. And Darrell rightly mentioned the role of the Welsh, the English, the Scots. There were Irish, there were Americans, there were Canadians. But who we often forget, and perhaps we need to look at how this might be rectified, I say we internationally now, was the enormous part played by German refugees from fascism in that war in Spain, communists and socialists, who fought ferociously. And even after the defeat of the Spanish Republic, they crossed the Pyrenees into France, where they played an absolutely central heroic role in the French resistance against Nazi Germany. And because, of course, too many Germans were on the other side at that time, we've tended to overlook the enormous contribution that German communists and socialists and anti-fascists played in the Spanish War. Almost exactly 90 years ago, in 2 weeks' time, a plane took off from Croydon Airport to Tenerife. Aboard was a British intelligence officer. I know British intelligence is a bit of a contradiction in terms, but a British intelligence officer by the name of Hugh Pollard. Flying the plane was an intelligence contact and gopher by the name of William Bebb. They took 2 young children along with them because the cover story was they were off on a private holiday to Tenerife. Now, I'm the last person to knock the idea of private holidays to Tenerife. But the reality was that with the full knowledge of Britain's intelligence services, they were going to take General Franco, who in effect had been demoted and exiled to Tenerife by the Spanish Republican government, to Morocco, so that he could mobilize the Spanish army in Africa to come to Spain and launch the coup that began the international war against fascism. And at the time when the rumors started to circulate about the real nature of the mission of Pollard and Bebb, the official line spun by the British government was that after this holidaymaker's plane had arrived in Tenerife, it had been commandeered by General Franco, and they had unwillingly flown him to Morocco. A complete pack of lies, as we know now, and which is not even disputed. Pollard's career in the intelligence services is quite interesting. We don't have time to go into it now, but previously he had been part of an operation in Mexico to rescue a future dictator in Mexico on behalf of the British government, and he'd also helped to engineer a coup in Morocco so that the royal dictator would be replaced by a more British-friendly royal dictator. But perhaps he's most infamous for having invented the Battle of Tralee. Now, I don't know how many of you, I hadn't heard of this before this weekend, the Battle of Tralee. You could see it on the Pathé newsreels, you could read it in the London Illustrated News, you could certainly read it in the Daily Mail, of course. which I suspect has never told the truth about anything other than the date at the top of the front page in its whole career. But the Battle of Tralee was where our heroes, as we now have to call them, it's compulsory, I believe, our heroes, the British Armed Forces, otherwise known in Ireland as the Black and Tans, had carried out a pogrom in Tralee, where they had burnt down several houses, shops, pubs, shot a few civilians. You know the story, it wasn't the only place they did that in Ireland. But in order to counteract the bad publicity that began to circulate about the atrocities of the Black and Tans, Hugh Pollard was given the job, and a special Daily Mail journalist was sent over to help him to invent another battle, the real Battle of Tralee, although it was reenacted on the streets of a seaside suburb of Dublin. And you can see the newsreel, you can see the pictures on the front page of the London Illustrated News of the supposedly dead bodies. And in the background you can see these vicious, wicked Sinn Féiners with their hands up being arrested by our heroic boys. The problem was, this was nowhere near Tralee, and it wasn't the real Battle of Tralee at all. It was entirely invented. People played their parts. Nobody was killed, nobody was arrested. It was entirely fictitious. And it was supposed to replace the real siege of Tralee, which is where the atrocity, in fact, had taken place. Of course, what they weren't able to do was to disguise some of the surrounding scenery. So it was found out that the Battle of Tralee, so-called, had never taken place. Complete invention. Now, Pollard's role was discovered in later years. What happened? Was he penalised? Was he dragged before any courts? Was he demoted or punished in any way? Of course not. He was given a well-paid government job for the rest of his life. The Daily Mail journalist went back to writing the daily lies in the Daily Mail. And you have to wonder, when you discover more and more about the history of the British intelligence services, have we ever been told the truth about any significant foreign policy or foreign event in British history? I've been reading recently a marvellous paperback by Anna Reid. It's called The Nasty Little War. And it's about the role of British forces in the war that broke out after the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. She's done an enormous amount of research. She's gone to private archives of letters of serving military officers and so on. And of course we were told that those British troops were out there merely to protect British oil and other interests as the war between the Reds and the Whites raged in Russia. At the same time, of course, the Daily Mail and almost every other national paper was filled with the terrible atrocities being committed by the Bolsheviks. You read Anna Reid's book. She's no left-winger, by the way. She had to submit it for intelligence vetting. I suspect they didn't just vet it, they actually wrote the final chapter, because it bears no relation to what she's revealed in the preceding chapters. But what she finds are letters home from British military officers saying, what are we doing here? We witness the most appalling atrocities by the forces of the Whites, but our own government, including Lloyd George, are standing up telling the British Parliament and the British people about the terrible atrocities committed by the Reds. The complete opposite of the truth. And it's there in black and white in Anna Reid's book. We don't have the rest of the afternoon to talk about some other infamous incidents, but just find out more about the role of the British Army in Greece in 1944, where it intervened militarily. It bombed working class suburbs of Athens to prevent the communist-led resistance, by far the biggest resistance movement in Greece, to prevent them taking power after the Nazis had been driven out. You probably already know a little bit about the coup in Iran in 1953, where the British and American intelligence forces overthrew the democratically elected president because he threatened British oil interests, and that led to the military dictatorship over the following decades. That was Iran. We supported Saddam Hussein in Iraq for as long as he was shooting and hanging communists, socialists, Democrats, liberals. We armed him, we financed him. And then, of course, what did come to light was the supergun scandal, where we tried to pretend that we knew absolutely nothing about the building of a huge supergun in Britain to be sent to Saddam Hussein for his war against Iran. Eventually, one of the people who spilt the beans about that got assassinated on his doorstep in Brussels. It's all a matter of record. And to this day, apparently, we have no idea who's responsible. Well, if they didn't do it themselves, I think we know who would have a damn good idea who was responsible. And then we come to the Iraq War, for example. No need to say any more about the lies there. Some of that has come to light, not all of it. And linked to that previous scandal, the Matrix Churchill scandal. There was a major British armaments company, and its chief executive, Paul Henderson, again spilt the beans. And he said, when I went to work there, as I rose up the ladder, as I became a director, I realized half the people running the company were agents of British intelligence. Unfortunately, Paul Henderson had a very unfortunate accident when he had to seek exile in Chile. Again, some of these facts are not in dispute. It's the interpretation we wish to play on them. So I come back to the theme. Whether it's about Spain, whether it's about Iran, Iraq, whether it's about British foreign policy, almost anywhere and everywhere, it is almost all of it a pack of lies. And you'll only discover that, of course, if you do what you can to make a study of it and to talk to some of the people who have survived that. I think, I'm going to be a bit provocative to finish, I think the last time the English ruling class spoke the truth about any aspect of their foreign policy was in the Acts of Incorporation between 1535 and 1542, when Wales was incorporated into England. It wasn't an act, they weren't acts of union, by the way. They were acts of incorporation, and one of the clauses said that the Welsh language, customs and institutions must be thoroughly, and the word the acts use, extirped, wiped out, destroyed. I suspect that was the last time the English ruling class spoke the truth about any significant foreign policy that it ever had. But today, let's not forget those people who are still struggling against the kind of forces that mobilized in support of the Spanish rebels and fascism. And if they didn't send military aid directly, they made sure that no military supplies reached the Republican government in Spain. Let's not forget the struggles today, and in particular, the people of Cuba, the people of Venezuela, and the people of Palestine. And that's why we've got a new government in Wales. It certainly was a lot better than the only realistic alternative. We've got a new government in Wales. Many of the people in that ruling party in Plaid Cymru have a very good record in terms of solidarity with Cuba and solidarity with Palestine. We've got to try and ensure that that is reflected in the policies and the actions of the Welsh government. And it's not just down to them. This was an excellent point made by somebody in the Morning Star conference in Cardiff yesterday. It's not just down to the Senedd members and the Welsh government to carry out what we demand they should be carrying out in solidarity with those peoples. We've also got to ensure that we work to show there is public support for those policies. They will come under enormous attack, as we know. It's happening already. And the more they act in solidarity with Cuba or Venezuela or Palestine, the more vicious will be the attack from all different directions, particularly on social media. Why are they wasting time? What about the people of Wales? Who cares about Palestine? What's it got to do with us? We've got to show, as with Spain in the 1930s, it has everything to do with us. And that's why we want a government in Wales and we want a Senedd in Wales that not only protects and defends the interests of the people of Wales, but we see that as part of an international struggle for social justice and people's liberation. Thank you.